Jacob, good to see you. Welcome to Popternative.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
You know, it's interesting because even before actually going and filming Midas Man, I just want to know, because you get kind of confirmed that you are playing the manager of arguably the greatest band and group of all time. What is going through your mind even before officially kind of diving into playing, Epstein specifically? Like, do you think about it a lot? Do you not think about it? The magnitude of this role? I'm curious about that.
I thought about it a lot. Yeah. And I had a long time to think about it, because I think I had something like 6 months to prepare, which is completely unknown for me. Usually, I don't have a lot of time. So, and I'm glad I had the time, because there was a lot to discover. I didn't know anything. So there was a lot to discover, a lot to read, a lot to listen to, a lot to watch, people to meet and talk to about him. And then, I was aware that it was a big world I was stepping into, of very passionate, very knowledgeable people who care a great deal and know a great deal and expect and want it to be done right. Yeah. So there was, I thought, a kind of responsibility and a pressure, but it was good because it meant I really wanted to work hard. And he's a fascinating man, and it's a fascinating story. So it was, it was easy to get really immersed in it.
Absolutely. And so much happens before you go to camera on something like this. There's so many discussions, and you're talking to like the writers, directors, there's the costume, there's the set deck, there's all these things. So from an acting storyteller perspective, you can see it as two journeys, right? Before filming and after filming. Did it feel like one big journey with multiple steps in between with this film specifically? Yeah,
one big journey, I guess. You're right. There's so much that happens before you start. And there are so many people instrumental to making the film, but also like bringing Brian, representing Brian, not just myself. And that's, meeting Libby, the costume, and working on costume. That's meeting Bethany Swan and working on the hair that he had, which was very particular. That's, getting to know Brigit, the writer, the relationship with the director, of course. And then meeting people like Frida Kelly, who was Brian's, when they were still working in Liverpool, she was one of his assistants.
Yeah.
So, meeting her was extraordinary to get still closer to him. Mm-hmm. You do huge amounts, and then you've got to kind of just trust it and hope that it's going to work. And then I suppose the first day on set feels like, a new chapter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have faith and trust, and that you've done enough, and that people around you are doing their jobs, and that it's going to work out okay.
It's interesting, too, because, for people that see the film, and you do an incredible job in this film, Jacob, congratulations. It's interesting because, I always think about this with music movies or biopics or even movies about sports. Like, for example, it's like, is this a movie, like, about, a manager that has music in it? Is this a music film about a guy who's a manager, right? It's like that push and pull and everything. How did it originally read? Like, did it just read purely as kind of a biopic about Brian specifically? Did it feel like it was a music film? Because it really focuses on the business, but it focuses on the music as well. Like, I'm just curious about that, because I find that interesting too, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can't have the story without some of the music, but I mean, it's Brian's story.
Yeah.
There's a lot in the film that is, behind the scenes, the rest of his life when he wasn't managing a music band. So it felt to me like a biopic of a man a lot of people don't know much about.
No.
Despite his extraordinary achievement, despite his like centrality in British culture and world culture, people don't know a great deal about him. So it felt like a biopic with the like added bonus that you get some great music in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm wondering, because it's all storytelling at the end of the day. And you've gotten to work on, a lot of really cool projects, different characters, different worlds, different eras and everything. But how separate are past projects compared to something like this? Like, do you bring mindsets, preparation, ideas from something like Queen's Gambit to something like Midas Man, or are they completely separate once you wrap them? Because I find that interesting as well.
Yeah, I mean, everything feels pretty separate. I guess I certainly bring experience and learning. I mean, Queen's Gambit now some years ago, and I learned a hell of a lot on that set. So working with Scott Frank, working with Anya, like I learned a lot. So I think, I probably couldn't have done this role had I not done things like Queen's Gambit.
Yep.
but to know exactly what I bring from one thing to the other, I don't know exactly. But it's some confidence, experience, for some feel of some kind of right to be able to do it, I guess.
Absolutely. The scene really, the film really kind of shows, Brian's story and the kind of obstacles in its way of him being kind of the, greatest manager he can be to who he thinks could be the greatest band on the planet with the Beatles. And, we see a lot of kind of interactions with Brian and, the band, but specifically there's a scene I wanted to talk to you about. And I'm wondering if there's any kind of, fun fact, or just it's one of those things like, no, you just go in and do it. But like the scene where you are letting Pete Best know that he will not be in the Beatles anymore, because that is something that the reason I like that is because we know that Ringo Starr wasn't the original, drummer of the Beatles, but we don't know like that much. We know it's Pete Best, but we don't know that much about it. We don't know like if there was a conversation. So there's a conversation where he says the band's going with another drummer. Take me through that scene. Does it feel like a very kind of important scene when you get the sides for it and you get the script? Like, I'm just wondering about that scene specifically.
Yeah, it does feel like an important scene. An important scene to get right, to get the feeling of that right, to get the guilt that Brian felt, that she really did feel, and it was put on his shoulders. It was a group decision, but I think it was put on him, to make that, not make the call, but to go through with it. The huge impact it had on the fan base. And then, of course, the huge impact it had on Pete Best's life.
Yeah.
We wanted to honor that moment properly. And Adam Lawrence is incredible in that scene. And it was easy to work with everyone in this film because it's an incredible cast. But it felt like another day at work, to be honest. But
yeah, I feel like that might have been the thing, but I was just like, it just stood out to me because it was like, wow, they're showing the conversation. You know what I mean? Like.
Yeah, and there'll be no exact knowledge of how that went down and what exactly said. So it's Brigit using her imagination, doing a brilliant job with that. But no, it is actually a scene, interestingly, that a lot of people do bring up, say that they were moved by and were particularly interested in because, to be a fly on the wall in that moment.
Is there a lot of getting in the mood and just listening to the Beatles all the time while you're filming this? Or is it something where it's around too much while you're filming it that you need a break from it? Like, I'm just curious about that a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I listened to a lot before.
Yeah.
And I never really listened, albums from the beginning to end much in my life. Obviously, I know a lot of the music, but I hadn't really ever sat down and just listened to the albums properly. Yeah. So I did that before, as well as to Scylla's music and Billy J. Kramer. But once we began, no, I do use music sometimes to get me in some particular emotional places or just to relax that. But no, I think once I was on, I was like, I've done enough listening now. Let me just do this.
Yeah. You mentioned, the preparation and research of, the Beatles component of the music and everything. I'm wondering if there was any specific conversations or research in regards to the business component of this film, right? Specifically the fact that he is a manager and everything. Was there any discussions about that? Did you read any kind of music business books? I'm just wondering about that component of it specifically too.
I didn't read any specific business books. I read a great biography of him by a guy called Ray Coleman, which was written not long after he passed, or at least had the approval of the family. Another great book, which is a compilation of thoughts, memories, recollections of Brian from friends, family, colleagues, business partners. So there's loads in there about his business dealings. They were encountering things that no one had ever encountered before. So there's lots of different thoughts about where they went wrong, what they could have done better. We see in the film that he's getting a bit of heat from his brother about the advertising deal that he made, and that he's not getting enough, and the merchandise deal rather that he made, and he's not getting enough of a percentage on it.
Yeah.
It was like to understand and have context for how big those decisions were, how much they impacted, and how worrying they were, and how someone like Brian, who was really, really keen to get things right and do right by people. And if he made a mistake, he would take it very much to heart. To understand the emotional cost of getting a decision wrong, and he was constantly living in, That was important to understand.
Absolutely. And last question before we wrap up. I feel like the answer to this might be no, or you tried not to, but I'm wondering about this because with, you know, the story of Brian and the Beatles, everyone's always interested about like the behind the scenes, right? About like how basically everything came to fruition, so to speak, right? And everything. And given that, I'm wondering if you're ever conscious of the audience member watching Midas Man when you're making it and filming, so to speak? Or is that something that kind of happens a little bit after you wrap? Maybe conversations or like how people are going to react to certain things, like we said about that whole scene with Pete Best. Like, I'm wondering, I feel like you try not to, you're in the present as an actor, but I'm wondering if that ever happens here and there.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I grew up doing theater, so I'm quite accustomed to having a live audience. So it took me a long time to get used to filming when I was younger, that not having a live audience. And when you have a live audience, you're very attuned to, or at least you think you are. You're very often wrong at the end of the night. You think, oh, they really enjoyed that, and they didn't, or they really hated me tonight. They actually were fine. But with a film like Midas Man, I mean, I definitely had a sense in the back of my mind of how I hoped people would feel.
Yeah.
That was important tonally, you know, and I spoke to Joe a lot about that, and Joe has made, I feel, a very tender, emotional film, and I'm really happy about that because he was a beautiful guy, and I think we really wanted people to feel for him, to come out of this film and know a bit about his heart, you know, not just about what he did, but a bit like a look into his soul and see that and I'm really pleased that people are saying to us, wow, what a beautiful guy, what a terrible thing that he died so young. He did so much, but also he was loving and gentle. And that's of course we wanted the film to be an explanation of the achievements of his life and the extraordinary things he did, because so many people don't know, but we really, really wanted people to love him.
Absolutely.
And feel for him and to feel for what he had to go through in his life as well. So yeah, we had that in the back of our mind, and that was important to just make sure that tone was coming through.
And I can't wait for people to see your amazing performance in this film as Brian and Midas Man. Jacob, it was great chatting with you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. It was great to talk to you.
Thank you for tuning in to Popternative. Make sure to check out our past episodes of Popternative on YouTube.
This has been an Autograph Communications production.